everybody. So today we are going to be talking about Asteroid Psyche. This is asteroid number 16 if you want to pull it in your own chart on astro.com or wherever else. First, I'm going to mention about how I kind of read her in a chart, and then I'll go into the mythology behind why. That was loud. And the reason for that is I know some people don't really care about all that. They would rather just know how to read, how to maybe read something. I do think the mythology is important though, because it kind of gives context as to why I read her in this way. But just in case you're not interested in all of that, I do feel like Psyche is a place in the chart where one needs to say fuck all the noise, to turn inward and tune out all the noise. And this would be, like by areas of life, depending on what house she falls in. How would be by sign. Of course, any aspects that she makes would flesh this out further. But there is a lot of noise in her mythology. I do think her mythology is very noisy, extremely noisy and riddled with assholes. And even people that weren't necessarily assholes in other stories or what, it just seems like her story brings out the assholes, brings the assholes out to play, and they're noisy. So I do think that she can deal with noise and like tuning out that fucking noise and going inward to tune it out, a little bit like Mercury retrograde. There is a little similar. They are different, but there is a similarity in terms of noise, or it feels that way to me. I feel like there's also soul healing and soul nourishing that needs to happen with Psyche in the natal chart. And this might be harder to do if one is taking in all of the noise. I'm reading the notes that I took to make this make sense. So if I'm looking down, that's what I'm doing. Because her name does mean soul. The name Psyche does translate to soul. So there's definitely a soul component here. But I think more than just the soul, I think it's like there's actually a mind, body, spirit integration that needs to happen with Psyche. And I think that can really only happen once the noise is tuned out. And it's by bringing all these things together that the soul healing, the soul nourishing actually happens. I also think that Psyche is a place in the chart where you find out what you're made of, both mind, body, and spirit, and the integration of all three. Because she definitely went through trials and things like that. And I do think that she kind of had to figure out what she was made of. I also think though Psyche in the natal chart can be a place where you have aids, or where you're helped, or where you're aided, where you can either call on these things or they just kind of happen. They just kind of happen to help you. And I bring that up because in her mythology, she was aided several times. Though the mythologies that I've read, she didn't actually ask for it. It just kind of came to her. So I do think that there is some sort of help with Psyche in the chart, that the person could consciously or unconsciously kind of call on. But there is an aid there. If you've got like that, it would probably depend on, where, what areas of life by house, and how by sign. And like if there's a planet conjunct Psyche, that planet being the what energy needs to be expressed, it might also be an aid with Psyche as well. And any aspects that you want to count. With asteroids, I tend to pay the most attention to the conjunctions. I think they're the most dynamic. But if you want to mess with other stuff too, by all means, those things could also help one tap into like being aided, if you will. Okay, so I also think Psyche has a lot to do with transformation and metamorphosis. Her symbol is a butterfly. It's like a butterfly. And what do butterflies do? They have to go through a state of metamorphosis and transformation to become fucking butterflies. So, I mean, and her story, there is a transformation in her story. She goes from mortal to, immortal, to goddess. So now, I'll also say this before I dig into her mythology. Her story with Eros, if you read about their story, a lot of people have this very positive take on it. I don't have the same take at all. Really, I think their story is pretty fucked. It's very fairy tale like, and honestly, a lot of fairy tales are fucked too. They do supposedly live happily ever after. However, I think if I think if Eros and Psyche were, with the way that their story was, I don't actually think they would have lived happily ever after. I just don't. They may have stayed together, but I think she probably would have ended up miserable. If this was real life. Just my opinion. Opinions are like assholes, but that is my opinion. But I do think that Psyche in a chart, I bring the relationship thing up real quick because I do think that Psyche in a chart can show, you know, when you're in a relationship with somebody, the shadow, you tend to be confronted with your shadows in some way. And I think here Psyche could stir some of those up, like soul shadows, if you will, specifically in the context of relationships, and things of that nature. I do think she can deal with the shadow and the Psyche because her name is fucking Psyche, you know, and things of that nature. So I do think that she can deal with that. And when I look at her and Eros, I do think that they are even though I'm not crazy about their love story. I'm not. I think it's pretty fucked, really, in a lot of ways. But I do think that in synastry, you can look at them together because, like, Eros is desire, Psyche is soul. So you could almost, taking their mythology out of the equation and just thinking about their names, soul's desire, that's kind of how I look at them in synastry. I would also think that in synastry, say somebody's got, like, they're like, somebody's Eros is conjunct somebody's something or another. Somebody's Psyche is conjunct somebody's something or another. Somebody's Eros and Psyche are conjunct. You know, I might think that there is like a desire, a soul's desire thing going on between them, but that doesn't mean it's easy, and it also doesn't mean that it's healthy. But anyway, into the mythology, so that how I read them can make sense. Okay, so in her mythology, she was born mortal. And she was very, very beautiful, supposedly. Very, very beautiful. Aphrodite was jealous of this because people actually thought that Psyche was more beautiful than Aphrodite. And this pissed Aphrodite off. Aphrodite really acted like a bitch in this mythology. I'll be honest. She acted like a bitch. And I know that, and I guess this kind of shows that nobody's black or white, good or bad, you know, whatever. We all have different dimensions of ourselves, right? Different sides of ourselves. But this particular mythology really paints Aphrodite in a bitch light. Anyway, so Aphrodite had a son named Eros. Now, I'll also say this. In other mythologies, Eros sometimes is mentioned as Aphrodite's boy toy and not her son. In this particular mythology, he does appear to be her son, but sometimes that doesn't seem to be the case. And I'm not a mythology expert, by the way. I'm not. In her mythology, Psyche's mythology, there are a lot of different ways that people interpret this. There seem to be a lot of different ways that it was translated. It's very noisy. When I say it's very noisy, this is what I mean. It's fucking noisy. There's a lot of noise with her mythology. I think it's very noisy, and to be honest, it makes me feel a little scattered. Because it's kind of, it just feels noisy. That's kind of why I associate her with noise around. Anyway, so Aphrodite wanted Eros to go and make Psyche fall in love with, like, a hideous beast creature, fucking asshole, fucking creep, you know, whatever, some terrible human being, so essentially that would move Psyche out of the way, and Aphrodite could have her place again as being the most beautiful, because people would think less of Psyche because she was with some terrible fucking creep. Okay, so, but when Eros went to go do that, he actually fell in love with Psyche himself and desired her. Now, he didn't move on this because he knew that he knew that Aphrodite would have an issue with it. So he didn't do anything about this. Now, at the same time, Psyche has sisters. Her sisters have been married off. Psyche is not. Psyche's very beautiful. Her parents aren't really understanding why, her dad's not understanding why she hasn't been married off, why nobody wants to marry her. It seems like people just want to admire her, just want to look at her. Nobody really seems to want to get to know her, which I think is kind of sad. Really, they just want to admire her. They don't want to marry her. They don't want to get to know her. So her dad goes and consults the Oracle of Delphi. Delphi. I might be pronouncing that wrong. To figure out when she's going to get married. Will she get married? Those kinds of things. And the Oracle comes back with that Psyche was going to marry a beast that even the gods fear. Now, in some versions of her story, I've actually seen Eros come into play and have Apollo say this. So I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but I have seen this. I have seen it written like that. And knowing what I know of Eros and how in this mythology, I'm really not impressed with him. It wouldn't surprise me if he did that. Because if you desire something enough, depending on what it is, you might do anything for it. Anyway, so her parents are like, her dad, specifically her dad, is upset about this. And essentially they decide that she is going to meet her doom. Now, in some mythologies, she actually is okay with this, because it says she's going to marry a beast person or some terrible human being, and she would rather not come to pass, so she is okay with meeting her doom. In some versions, it doesn't appear that that's the case. It's her dad that kind of pushes this. Anyway, they dress her in like funeral attire, and they take her to some fucking cliff. Now, it's unclear to me whether or not she's supposed to jump from this cliff, or if she's just supposed to like stay there and like wither away and die. Either way, she's on this cliff, and Zephyrus, the west wind, comes and puts her to sleep and carries her away to a palace, to Eros's palace specifically. There is an aide coming to help her. She didn't ask for it, but he came and he helped her. Okay, so she wakes up and she's in Eros's palace, but she doesn't know that it's Eros's palace. She also doesn't know it's Eros. Now, in some versions, you'll see it's said that she wakes up and she is married to this person that owns this palace. In some, it's just like she's there, Either way, she is in some relationship with this person in this palace. And again, she does not know that it's Eros. This person that lives with her, Eros, will not come out during the day. He will only talk to her in the dark. Some versions, I guess they do fuck each other, but it's in the dark. She can't see him. I don't know that most of them, I don't actually see that happen. It's mainly him talking to her in places in the palace or from different rooms or in the dark. Either way, she don't know it's him. She doesn't know it's him. She has all of this. She has everything she could ever want, but she doesn't know it's him. She doesn't know who she's living with. Now, in some mythologies, she seems okay with this, and in some versions of it, she doesn't. Either way, in something that does seem to be the case, regardless, is she's lonely. Even if she's happy even if she's okay in the place that she is, and okay with not knowing who the fuck she's living with, she's lonely because she doesn't have, she doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know that he's Eros. So, somehow she gets wind that her sisters, her bitch sisters, and they do seem like they're assholes, are coming to wherever the palace is, and she wants to see them. And Eros makes the comment, he says he doesn't want her to, again, she doesn't know it's Eros, but he makes the comment that he doesn't really want her to see them because they could mess up everything. And this is interesting because families, right? Sometimes with families, you can have a partner, right? And your family doesn't like your partner. Or your partner's family doesn't like you, or whatever. Noise, noise, bullshit noise, bullshit. And so I kind of get the feeling that's kind of what he was talking about here. But he's not perfect either. I mean, he's the asshole that's not even showing, he's the asshole who's not even showing Psyche who he is. So it's, you know, she's getting it. She's getting fucked from all sides, as far as I can see. Anyway, so he finally says that, you know, he finally agrees to letting her see her sisters, because he feels bad that she is so sad about it. So her sisters come to the palace and and see that she is not dead, and they're very jealous of everything she has, right? So they start telling her, you know, or putting things into her head, putting things in her psyche. Like, why don't you know what he looks like? Why don't you know who you're living with, who you're talking to, who you're fucking, whatever. Now, to be fair, the sisters, under normal circumstances, I don't think there's anything wrong with with knowing these sorts of things, right? But in the sisters' case in the story, it was all, you know, from an angle of envy and wanting to fuck things up, not actually wanting to help Psyche, not actually wanting to help their sister's situation, but wanting to fuck with shit. So the motives weren't pure, I guess is what I mean, for the sisters. Anyway, so Psyche starts really thinking about this, right? And she probably honestly would have done this on her own, without her sisters even at some point. She would have been like, yeah, I want to fucking know who he is. So one night when he's sleeping, she goes into his room, she pulls back his covers to see who he is, and she's got like an oil lamp or whatever, and she sees that it's Eros, and she's like, oh, you know, so happy that it's him. And then some oil from the oil lamp or something drips on him, and it wakes him up. And he has a little bitch fit that she didn't trust him, that she didn't trust in their love, she or some bullshit. And there are two different versions of this. One is that he runs off, like just totally leaves the palace, and she wanders around looking for him for a while, not just in the palace, but other places too. And then in another version of the mythology, and this version seems weird, but in one version, he feels like he's so betrayed that he goes to Aphrodite to bitch about it, which seems weird because he spared her before because he knew his mother would have an issue with it. So that part seems kind of weird. I'm actually inclined more to think that he probably just left like a bitch. You betrayed me. Okay. To me, it's very normal for somebody, you know, to me, this is like somebody getting pissed that they got caught. You know, I don't think there's any betrayal there. I know that there are some people that I've read this online, and it kind of pisses me off. It's like, she didn't believe in love. She didn't trust in love. What? So it's totally normal for somebody to be living with somebody, be talking to somebody, and not know who they are. And I mean this literally and figuratively, right? How is that okay? How the hell is that okay? No, she didn't need to trust him. She didn't fucking know him. She didn't know it was him. He didn't apparently trust her enough to tell her who he was. So I don't know. I think that's no. I'm Team Psyche on that one. That's some fuck shit as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, so she goes wandering around looking for him, or he goes and tells Aphrodite, goes and tells his mom what she did. Regardless, Aphrodite sets up a trial for her, a series of 4 trials if she wants to be with Eros. The 4 trials deal with sifting through grain, with getting wool from a sheep, from going to the underworld, and then bringing back some of Persephone's beauty for Aphrodite from the underworld. And and she has help during this too, like some ants help with the grain. She has an eagle help her. You know, she has aids throughout these different trials. She does pass them, but she does have help. She does have aids. She's able to get aids, and it doesn't even seem like she actually asked for them. They're just kind of there. They're just kind of there for her. Now, in one version of the mythology, she actually dies, coming back to bring Aphrodite, the beauty from Persephone. It almost, in this myth, it kind of seems like Persephone was trying to kill off Aphrodite, because she opens it up and it's like death. It's like Persephone's like, fuck you, Aphrodite. That's kind of what it feels like it was meant for Aphrodite. Anyway, in one version of the mythology, Psyche ends up dying when she does that, when she opens it up, because she was curious, she wanted to see what it was. And then in another version, she passed all of the trials. In either version, she ends up marrying Eros. And in one version, the version where she dies, Eros brings her back and makes her immortal. And then in the other version, she's just made immortal by finishing these trials and whatever. And then they get married. Because he's done being a little bitch, being butthurt. I don't know. Like, to me, I maybe I didn't read the right versions. I read several versions of her mythology. Maybe I didn't read the right ones. But I see people, there is kind of a helplessness here with Psyche too, that I feel like people do need to kind of, I feel like Psyche in a chart could also be a place where you could feel helpless, but you're really not. You're really not. I do think that there is something about that as well. You can play around with that one too. Just because there were things that, you know, it feels like a lot of her story, I fail to see what she's done wrong here. I see some people talk about things that she did wrong. I don't really, to me, it just seems like she was around a bunch of assholes. Or a bunch of people who played the asshole characters in her mythology. They may not have been assholes in other ways. Either way, I do think that the idolization of her relationship with Eros is weird. Like, I don't think there's anything really that great about it. You know, but again, just like other fairy tales, you know, or other children's, or other like Disney movies, like Beauty and the Beast, which there are some themes with this and Beauty and the Beast a little bit. Beauty and the Beast, I'm trying to figure out what, you know, going back as an adult and watching these, like, if you want, you know, kids can watch them, whatever, but if you really watch them as an adult, I'm not really sure what's so great about it. I mean, she like had fucking Stockholm syndrome. And like The Little Mermaid, she gave up her voice to be with Prince Eric. Why? Like, why? And then in the real fairy tale, she fucking dies. She fucking dies. In the story. So, you know, these love stories that we idolize, we tend to idolize, or these fairy tales that we tend to idolize. I don't think they're so great. I think we need to idolize real life love, not this kind of bullshit. But I do think, again, that you can read Eros and Psyche in like synastry, but think about it like soul and desire, and kind of leave the mythology out of it a little bit, and just think about it in those terms of what the different names mean. Yeah, anyway, I'm gonna head off. This one got long. I actually feel really, really passionate about Psyche, because she's conjunct my Mars. So her story actually does kind of fire me up in a certain kind of way. But yeah. If you want to share below where Psyche is in your chart, what she's doing in your chart, how you feel about her, how you read her, feel free to do so below. And I will put where you can find me below if you're interested in having me read Psyche in your chart, or any kind of asteroids or whatever. Put where you can find me below. And I will see y'all later.